A while ago, I posted this video. A bad night on Battlefield 6 turned me into a video game philosopher. In that video, I talked about how a particularly rough night on that game had me questioning why I play it along with online PvP games in general. I felt very vindicated in my feelings when reading some of the comments. But along with people sharing their experiences with Battlefield 6 or online PvP games in general, there were a couple in the mix that caught my attention. These comments in question talked about Battlefield 6's matchmaking. At first, it started with just one comment claiming that there was engagement-optimized matchmaking in the game. I brushed it off, not thinking much of it. The devs said there wouldn't be any kind of manipulative matchmaking in the game. Although you shouldn't ever trust what comes out the mouths of most game developing and publishing studios, it made sense to me at the time. If the game had a super strict skill-based or engagement-optimized matchmaking system akin to modern-day Call of Duty, given that most of the time you're playing 32v32 game modes, that kind of matchmaking system would struggle. And based on my personal experience, it didn't feel like my matches were being manipulated. So I paid no further attention to it and just kept on going about my life. Then I got another comment that mentioned Battlefield 6's matchmaking system. I found it interesting that there were two comments about the same topic, but I still paid no serious attention to the idea that this game's matchmaking system could be manipulative. But then a third comment mentioned the idea of some kind of matchmaking manipulation. And then there was a fourth. I'm no stranger to the idea of online multiplayer games having manipulative matchmaking algorithms in them. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019 and Black Ops Cold War are two games that I've played where I've felt this in full effect. Modern Warfare 2019's abysmal multiplayer is what made me put down Call of Duty altogether, with Black Ops Cold War being an, I might as well give it a shot kind of deal given that I got it for free thanks to PlayStation Plus. I know what it's like to boot up what is essentially a digital casino. You get a good match, then you get two bad ones, but then the game hands you an easy lobby so you feel on top of the world. The game is then hoping that because of the dopamine rush it just gave you, you'll play for just a bit longer to boost those retention numbers, and maybe you'll even buy a $20 bundle from the store in your excitement. I'm aware of the tactics used by studios like Activision, but if that's the case, surely I would have noticed any manipulation going on with Battlefield 6, right? A quick look online reveals that multiple people are swearing up and down that SB/EOMM is in the game. It definitely doesn't help that the developers are very resistant to the idea of including a server browser in the main multiplayer part of this game. They say that if people really want a server browser, they can go to Portal. Problem is, Portal in its current state is a bit of a mess. And Portal is not intended to be the main mode that people spend most of their time in. But a little concern stemming from the words and actions, or rather inaction, from developers isn't enough to confirm whether or not Battlefield 6 has SB/EOMM. Everywhere I looked, people just had what were effectively hunches. There weren't any full-fledged experiments from what I saw. Experiments where someone had sat down and recorded their experiences with a variety of variables for a set amount of time before posting their findings. So, with the burning desire to get to the bottom of this Battlefield 6 matchmaking dilemma, I did exactly that. But before we dive into that, it's important to first understand how the developers claim the matchmaking works. According to the devs, Battlefield 6 has no skill-based / engagement-optimized matchmaking. They claim that the matchmaking system finds a random group of people first, and then team balancing kicks in to ensure that things are as fair as possible. Right away, this presents an interesting point. In order for the game to know which team to put you on, it needs to have some kind of indication as to what your skill level is. Without that, the game wouldn't know which team to put you on as it does its team balancing. And to be fair, in the days leading up to Battlefield 6's launch, it was confirmed that your skill level would be a factor the matchmaking would take into consideration. But with the way it was worded, it seemed like that would either only be used for team balancing or in cases such as keeping people out of things like protected brackets. It wouldn't be used in the same manipulative and aggressive manner like in Call of Duty. So even though skill is a listed factor here, the devs claim that it isn't the dominant factor of matchmaking. Hence why I say the devs claim there's no SB/EOMM at all. So right out the gate, we know that Battlefield 6 does keep track of your performance. It has an indication of your skill. That being said, just because we know the game keeps track of your skill level, that alone doesn't prove that it's being used in nefarious ways. Which brings us back to how I went about conducting this experiment of mine. What you see here is my Battlefield 6 match performance tracker. Let me walk you through it real quick. The Match Performance Tracker, referred to from here on out as the MPT, was my way of evaluating the matches that I participated in during the 7 days that this experiment lasted. Specifically from 1 p.m. give or take on Saturday, February the 7th to midnight on Saturday the 14th. On top of the miscellaneous stuff like what day it was and how many matches I played that day, the MPT has 9 different conditions that I took into account for each match that I played. Matchmaking time measures how long it took me to connect to a match. In theory, these values should all be small, indicating lightning fast matchmaking time since the matchmaking algorithm doesn't need to ensure that every single person has similar skill levels. The next 3, game mode, map, and win-loss, are all self-explanatory. Connection quality is how the, connection was for a particular match. To keep things simple, I used 3 different possible answers: good, mixed, and bad. Good means that I had no lag spikes, I didn't die around a corner, there was no noticeable delay between when the killing blow was delivered to an enemy versus when the game registered them as dead, etc. Mixed means that I may have had an instance or two where I died around a corner or I got a kill that fell off in some way, but those moments weren't common throughout the match. Bad means that I had multiple instances of connection-related fuckery in a round. With this variable, I kept my eyes peeled for any instances where I didn't have a good time on top of the connection being bad. In games like modern-day Call of Duty, the matchmaking system will sacrifice your connection quality to ensure you're matched up with opponents the matchmaking system deems necessary. So, I kept my eyes peeled to see if anything like that happened here. Join in progress is a simple yes-no variable. Did I join a game that was already underway? In particular, I wanted to see if I had any instances where I joined on the losing team, which could hint at the matchmaking system wanting me to lose to experience an emotional low so that an emotional high later down the line could hit harder. Teammate quality is how well my teammates did during a match. Once again, I used good, mixed, and bad. Good means my teammates were on point for revives, vehicle repairs, my teammates were really playing the objective, things like that. Mixed means my teammates could have done better, but they weren't entirely useless either. And bad means my teammates were awful, leaving me to die, not playing the objective, choking some of the most winnable gunfights ever, things like that. Referencing modern-day COD once again, if the matchmaking system determines that you need to lose this game, it'll purposely put you with teammates, essentially demanding that you carry the whole team if you want to win. I wanted to see if anything like that happened here. Enemy difficulty ranks how easy versus difficult the enemies in a match were. Easy, medium, and hard were the possible outcomes here. Easy means my team and I absolutely steamrolled the opposition. I got a bunch of kills, didn't have to sweat too hard, an easy and chill round. Medium means I had to lock in a little. The enemies put up a decent fight, but they weren't treating the round like money was on the line. Hard means the enemies were being so sweaty I could smell their armpit stink through my screen. I had to totally lock in, the enemies were treating the match like money was on the line, my team and I got absolutely steamrolled the whole game, things like that. I kept my eyes peeled to see if I could identify any suspicious patterns with the enemy difficulty from the matches I played on any given day, such as sweaty enemies in conjunction with a bad connection quality. And lastly, did I enjoy the match? Whatever happened in that particular game, whether I went positive or negative, whether my team and I won or lost, whether I made any major progress on ranking up guns and vehicles, whatever the case may be, at the end of the day, can I say that I had fun with that match? Either yes, I did enjoy the match, it could have been better, or no, that round was a pain in the ass. Green means a positive response type, yellow means a mixed response type, and red means a negative response type. One last thing. For this experiment, I set these guidelines for myself. I did my best to play at least 5 matches per day. I could not rage quit out of any matches. No matter how painful some of them were, I made sure to play through each and every one of them to completion. Or rather, I tried my best. Full disclosure, I did leave early from 3 of them during this experiment. I had to be on Ethernet for all of these matches. This wasn't really a rule since I use Ethernet in my day-to-day life rather than Wi-Fi anyway, but I figured it was important to disclose that here for anyone wondering. And lastly, on weekdays, the earliest I allowed myself to dive into a match was 7 p.m. This was to ensure I had the highest pool of potential players to be matched up with. By 7 p.m., lots of people would have been done with work or classes for the day, plus any immediate post-work or class routines like showers and dinners. On the first 2 days, Saturday the 7th and Sunday the 8th, I allowed myself to hop on whenever. Okay, that's all the pieces of the MPT covered. Let's dive into the results. Day 1 was dedicated to Conquest, the first match being on Empire State. It took me 3 seconds to get into this match, and I joined right at the start. The connection was great, my teammates were great, the enemies were chill, aside from a few slimy corner campers, and in general, it was an amazing first game of the day. Off to a strong start. Then we got to Liberation Peak. I joined this game from the beginning, and it only took 4 seconds to get into. My team and I had a strong start, but things quickly fell apart after that. The enemies, while not full-on sweaty, were putting up a good fight. My teammates could have done better. I had moments of getting my ass kicked paralysis where I just stared at the spawn screen, not even sure that I wanted to throw myself back into the meat grinder that had taken shape. I got called Thunderous Fart in the text chat. The exact opposite of a good game. It doesn't help that Liberation Peak just isn't a good Conquest map, since whoever controls the C point basically controls the entire map. And guess which team had that point for basically the whole game? It should go without saying, but I did not enjoy that match. Match number 3 was on Eastwood. It took me 3 seconds to get into this one, and I did join in progress. This one was alright. I got to have some fun in the attack helicopter, but when I was on foot, it was a mix of good and bad moments. This is also the first game in which I had some sus connection stuff going on with a death involving an armored transport. A very middle-of-the-road round, hence why I'm saying meh for whether I had fun or not. Match number 4 on Operation Firestorm was weird. It took me 2 seconds to get into this game, and I joined right from the beginning. I started in the attack helicopter, had a bit of fun, got shot down, then swapped over to the attack jet for the rest of the match. Despite my teammates sitting at the back of the map not pushing up to capture any of the objectives, and despite the enemies being super sweaty with their anti-air efforts, I still had fun. I got my fair share of kills in both the attack helicopter and the attack jet that round, and it felt good. It is worth noting though that at this point on day 1, this was my 3rd loss in a row. Match number 5 was on Manhattan Bridge. Once again, I was able to join from the start, and it only took me 3 seconds to get into this one. Aside from a couple instances of noticeable delays between when the killing shot was sent versus when the game recognized the enemy was dead, this was a fun round. The loss streak was finally broken with this round, and the enemies put up a decent fight but weren't overly sweaty. Match number 6, the last one for the day, ended on a good note. Siege of Cairo. It only took me 2 seconds to get into this one. I joined right at the start, my teammates were great, the enemies were easy, and aside from a sus connection moment here and there, this match was more or less perfect. Day 2 was dedicated to both regular and casual breakthrough. I did 5 rounds of regular breakthrough, followed up with 5 rounds of casual breakthrough. Beginning with the 5 regular matches of breakthrough first, the first game of the day was on Eastwood. I forgot to record the exact amount of time it took for me to matchmake, but it was quick, and I was able to join at the start. This round was painful to get through. I stuck around until the end, but just barely. My team could have been better but weren't the worst, the enemies put up a good fight, and my team and I ended up winning this round. But throwing myself into the meat grinder in a spawn, die, spawn, get a kill, die, spawn, get 3 kills, die, spawn, get a kill, die, spawn, get 2 kills, die loop was exhausting. In my experience, being the defenders on breakthrough is usually worse than being the attackers, the number one reason being horrible vehicle balancing at times. And this game reinforced that belief for me. I did not enjoy my first game of the day, which was a bad sign. Match number 2 was on New Sobek City. It took me 5 seconds to matchmake into this game, I joined at the start, and once more I was on the defending team. Now then, you know how I made it a rule for myself that I couldn't rage quit any matches? I just couldn't stick around for this one. The combo of seemingly nobody else playing engineer to deal with the enemy IFV, multiple connection-related fuckery moments during gunfights, and the enemy sweating their balls off with constant corner camping was just too much for me. Win-loss and teammate quality have question marks here since I didn't stick around until the end and I couldn't get a good read of my teammates during my brief time with this round. Match number 3 is the very first instance of it taking more than a couple of seconds for me to matchmake. 26 seconds to be exact. For a third time in a row, I was defending, this time on Empire State. I joined at the start, and this one was a middle-of-the-road game. Sus connection, sweaty enemies, but my teammates were solid and we put up a good fight. I didn't feel great at the end of the round, but I didn't feel terrible either. I just felt exhausted, hence why I say that round was meh. Match number 4 was on Mirage Valley. It took me 3 seconds to matchmake, I was on the defending team again, I was able to join at the start, and finally, I had a good game. Great teammates, good connection, and easy enemies. I had fun. Match number 5 had one of the longest matchmaking times out of this entire experiment at 43 seconds. It was on Operation Firestorm, take a wild guess as to which team I got put on. I joined at the start, and it was alright. My team and I won, my teammates were great, the connection was solid, but I could smell the armpit stink of the enemies through my monitor. It's because of how sweaty the enemies were that this game left me feeling exhausted, hence why I say it was meh. Match number 5.5. I say 5.5 because I didn't play this game out, but I did want to see if the game was intending to put me on the defending team for a 6th time in a row. Sure enough, the game was gonna have me defending once again. Normally, I wouldn't think much of it, but given that in my experience, being on defense is usually worse than being on offense, if the game does indeed have SB/EOMM, it wouldn't surprise me if the game was trying to put me on defense constantly to try and give me those bad matches so that any good ones could really stand out to me. Match number 6 was when I swapped over to casual breakthrough. I was finally granted the privilege, the honor, the duty, the oh so important task of attacking on breakthrough. Whoa. It took me 17 seconds to load into Blackweld Fields, I did join in progress, and the game was fun. When taking my teammates and the enemies into account for casual breakthrough, I was just focused on the human players. The bots included here aren't great, but they're not terrible either. The very definition of average. In this round, my teammates were great and the enemies were easy, plus the connection was solid. I had fun. Match number 7 was my return to New Sobek City, where I stayed for the whole round this time. It took me 2 seconds to matchmake, I joined at the start, I was on defense, my teammates were good, the enemies put up a good fight, the connection was solid, I had fun. Match number 8, attacking on Liberation Peak. It took me 16 seconds to matchmake, I joined at the start, and it was another fun round. Great teammates, easy enemies, great connection. Match number 9, attacking on Manhattan Bridge. It took me 11 seconds to matchmake, I joined at the start, my teammates could have been better, but they weren't the worst, the enemies were easy, and despite my team and I losing, I still enjoyed that match. Match number 10, the last one for the day, defending on Liberation Peak. It took me 13 seconds to matchmake, I joined at the start, the connection was good, my teammates were good, the enemies put up a decent fight, and I enjoyed that round overall. Day 3 was dedicated to Rush. This sucked! I typically don't play Rush, but I figured I should for the sake of game mode variety for this experiment. Oh, what a mistake this turned out to be! Match number 1, I was defending on Manhattan Bridge. I joined midway through, the connection was good, but my teammates were glue-eating incompetent f***s. Meanwhile, the enemies actually knew how to play the objective. Terrible first match of the day. Match number 2, I was attacking on Blackweld Fields right from the start. Aside from some sus connection moments, this game was perfect. A complete 180 from the terrible previous round. Great teammates, easy enemies, it was amazing. Match number 3, attacking on Eastwood right from the start. This round was exhausting. The connection was bad, my teammates were okay but not great, the enemies were sweaty. I just didn't want to be there after a certain point. I stayed until the end, but only out of obligation. I didn't enjoy that round either. Match number 4, defending on Liberation Peak right from the start. This round suffered from some terrible vehicle balancing. How terrible? In the first sector, the attackers got a tank and an IFV, meanwhile we defenders got nothing. It also didn't help that my teammates were once again incompetent and the enemies put up a decent fight. Not sweaty, but not easy either. My team and I ended up actually winning this round despite them being incompetent, and the connection was solid, but I did not feel victorious in the slightest. Match number 5, the last one for the day, once again attacking on Blackweld Fields right from the start. The connection was good, my teammates were good, the enemies were putting up a decent fight, but I left this game early too. Not for rage-related reasons, but because the game messed up. You see, we got to Sector 3 out of 4. We destroyed MCOM A, but when we went to arm MCOM B, we couldn't. Debris from the building that MCOM B was in literally made it impossible to arm any charges. Day 4 was dedicated to escalation. All of these matches I was able to join right at the start. None of them were in progress. Match number 1 was on Siege of Cairo. It took me 3 seconds to matchmake, and good God, this was a terrible way to start the day. Multiple sus connection moments, teammates that were too busy jerking off to some E621 on their second monitor instead of playing the fucking objective, and sweaty enemies to top it all off. Needless to say, I did not enjoy this match. Match number 2 was on Manhattan Bridge. It took me 8 seconds to matchmake, and this was a complete 180 from the previous game. I had a ton of fun with this one. Great connection, teammates that were locked in, and easy enemies. A well-deserved victory for my team and I. Match number 3 was on Iberian Offensive. It took me 3 seconds to matchmake, and this one was fine, I guess? Not great, but not terrible either. There was a sus connection moment or two in there. My teammates could have been better, but weren't the worst. The enemies weren't overly sweaty, but they still put up a good fight, and we ended up losing that round. Match number 4 was on Liberation Peak. It took me 15 seconds to matchmake, and I had fun with this round, but just barely. My team was solid, the enemies put up a good fight but weren't overly sweaty, and my team and I won the round. Again though, I did enjoy this round, but just barely. I actually had to debate with myself for a bit on whether this was a meh round or a fun round. Match number 5, the last one for the day, had me returning to Siege of Cairo. It took me 3 seconds to matchmake, and the connection was good, my teammates were solid, the enemies put up a good fight, my team and I won the round, and I had fun with this one. Day 5 was dedicated to domination. I'm gonna be 100% honest here, I have no interest in the smaller scale game modes of Battlefield 6. Domination, King of the Hill, Squad Deathmatch, I personally don't care for any of those kinds of modes. Despite that, I still wanted to play one of the smaller scale game modes to get some variety in there. So, match number 1 for the day, Blackweld Fields. I forgot to record the exact time it took me to matchmake, but it only took a few seconds. I joined in progress towards the end, and, say it with me now, this was an awful first game of the day. I forgot to start recording until the last minute or so of the round, skill issue on my part. My team and I got spawn trapped where we lost 33 to 200, and to add insult to injury, there was anti-Semitism in the text chat. Because I joined so close to the end, I couldn't get a read on the connection of the round, but I could absolutely get a read on my teammates and the enemies. If my team is losing 33 to 200, I can easily say my teammates were bad and the enemies were sweaty. Match number 2 was on Siege of Cairo. It took me 10 seconds to matchmake. I joined at the beginning. There was multiple rough connection moments during gunfights. My teammates were okay, but not the best. The enemies were a mix of easy people and sweaty people, and my team and I won the round. Overall, I didn't enjoy the round, but I didn't hate it either. Match number 3 was on Eastwood. I joined right at the start, the connection was good, my teammates were solid, the enemies put up a good fight but weren't overly sweaty, and we won the round. I had fun. Match number 4 was my first time ever playing on Saints Quarter. It took me 5 seconds to matchmake, I joined right at the start, the connection was good, my teammates were good, the enemies put up a good fight, and despite my team and I losing this round, I still had fun. I also fell to the dark side and used a shotgun during the latter half of this game. Despite me stooping to the low of using a no-skill point-and-shoot weapon like that, part of the reason why I had fun this round was because I was being a disgusting and slimy little bitch with the M1014. I'm allowed to be evil once in a while, right? Match number 5, the last one for the day, had me returning to Blackweld Fields. It took me 14 seconds to matchmake, I joined right at the start, the connection was a little sus during a gunfight or two but nothing too crazy, my teammates were good, the enemies were easy, and my team and I won. Day 6 was when I had to make a choice in regard to how I should proceed game mode wise. For a moment, I thought about stepping into the free-to-play part of Battlefield 6 with Gauntlet, but I ultimately decided against that because firstly, getting at least 5 rounds in would take a long while given how long Gauntlet matches can go on for if you happen to get a good streak going with your squad. And secondly, I just don't care all that much for the free-to-play side of Battlefield. I especially don't care about RedSec, the Battle Royale, but nowadays I really don't care for Gauntlet either. Yeah, I did have a bit of a Gauntlet kick over on Twitch when the game was only a couple of months old, but that time has passed. So, I decided that for the last 2 days of this experiment, I'd go back to Conquest. Day 6 is the oddball day because I only managed to get 3 rounds in. All 3 matches I joined right at the start, none of them were in progress. Match number 1 was on New Sobek City. It had a strong start, but things just became boring midway through, and unfortunately, it stayed that way. New Sobek City is a god-awful map for Conquest. Midway through, I was painfully reminded of how bad this map is on Conquest, and as a result, I resigned myself to being that slimy, disgusting little bitch in the back of the map with the mobile AA vehicle. The connection was good, my teammates were good, the enemies were easy, and my team and I won that round. But I still say that the round overall was meh for me because of how god-awful New Sobek City is. Match number 2 was on Manhattan Bridge, and holy shit, this one was rough. How come? My teammates. Oh my god, my teammates. The round began with my team somehow managing to destroy our attack helicopter at the start, which was not a good sign of things to come. And indeed, my fears came to fruition, as my team was so fucking bad. We were constantly losing our gimme point, our attack helicopter kept on dying, my team kept on losing easy gunfights. I don't know what I did to be put on the team of glue-eating useless fucking idiots, but the battlefield gods smited me that round. I left early because I was not about to subject myself to that CBT any longer. Match number 3, the last one for the day, was on Liberation Peak. And holy shit, this round was incredible. I got to have some fun in the attack jet this round, the connection was great, my teammates were great, the enemies were easy, and we wrecked their shit so hard, they begged for the round to end in the text chat. We beat their ass so hard, they got onto their knees and begged to be put out of their misery. Sure enough, we ended the round by capturing all of the points, trapping the enemies at their spawn, and forcing the game to end early. You have no idea how much I needed a round like that. Normally, I probably would have felt a little bad for the enemies here, but nah, I actively relished in their pain. I actively cheered for us to keep the beatdown going. I was laughing with joy and riding an emotional high that I hadn't felt in a long while. Where's the forfeit button? There ain't no forfeit button here, buddy. You're just gonna have to keep on dying to my grippin' until the game decides enough's enough. Unfortunately, I couldn't play any additional rounds after that one because the Battlefield 6 servers began shitting the bed shortly after the obliteration on Liberation Peak took place. I would join a match, and within 2 minutes or so, I'd get kicked for failing to connect to the servers. And the reason why I knew it was the servers and not my internet connection is because I had Whiskey Dingo and Blur the Fur pulled up on my second monitor, and their Twitch streams were both running flawlessly. There were no lag spikes or disconnects on Twitch's end when I was getting disconnected from Battlefield 6. So, as much as I would have liked to get 5 rounds in on day 6, I couldn't. I didn't want to try and brute force my way to the end of more matches, and I didn't feel like waiting a couple of hours and then trying again. So, I opted to just call it early, play a different game for the rest of the night, Grid Legends if anyone was curious, and wait until tomorrow for the final day of the experiment. Day 7, the final day. Although I knew I wouldn't be done with this project yet after this final day, being able to complete this part of it was a massive checkpoint for me. I decided to stick around for a few additional matches beyond the 5th one in order to make up for the Battlefield 6 server shitting the bed the previous day. All of these matches I joined right at the start, none of them were in progress. As a reminder, I stuck with Conquest for this last day as well. Match number 1 was on Siege of Cairo. It took me 16 seconds to matchmake, and while this wasn't a painful start to the day, it definitely could have been better. Bad connection, sweaty enemies, teammates that bounced back and forth between being great and stupid, and my team and I lost that round. I was able to get my fair share of kills and objective captures that round though, which is why I say it was meh instead of full-on bad. Match number 2 was on Manhattan Bridge. It took me 11 seconds to matchmake, and this was another middle-of-the-road round for the most part. Bad connection, my teammates could have been better but weren't the worst, and the enemies weren't full-on sweaty this time, but they still put up a good fight. Although I said it was a middle-of-the-road round, I did put down that I ultimately had fun because I had just enough good moments to outweigh the bad ones here. I've had better rounds for sure, but like I said, I had just enough fun with this one. Match number 3 was on New Sobek City. It took me 9 seconds to matchmake, and I had fun. Mostly because of the fact my team and I absolutely steamrolled the opposition here. But still, any kind of good round on this dog shit map is a miracle no matter the circumstances. Although the connection quality had a few hiccups, my teammates were incredible, the enemies were easy, and my team and I won the round by capturing all of the points. You bet I had fun with this one. Match number 4 was on Eastwood. It took me 6 seconds to matchmake, and this one wasn't great, but it wasn't bad either. The connection was good, but my teammates could have been better. In particular, we kept losing our gimme point. The enemies, while not sweaty, did put up a good fight, and my team and I lost the round. Match number 5 was on Mirage Valley. It took me 9 seconds to matchmake, and I had fun this round. The connection was good, my teammates were good, the enemies put up a decent fight, I engaged in some actually meaningful talk in the text chat, I was accused of huffing copium when saying that being single was cool, Valentine's Day was the following day, and my team and I won the round. Match number 6 was on Operation Firestorm. It took me 12 seconds to matchmake, and I channeled my inner Mobius 1 for this round because the majority of my time was spent in the Raptor, or as it's known officially in-game, the Kestrel. My teammates could have been better, but weren't the worst. The enemies put up a good fight. My team and I lost the round, but I did some damn good work in the skies. I got my fair share of kills and flying ace accolades during this round. So, despite losing, I had fun. Match number 7 was my return to Manhattan Bridge. It took me 4 seconds to matchmake, and this round went much better. Great connection, great teammates, easy enemies, and my team and I won the round. I also got sniped out of an attack helicopter, which, honestly, I wasn't even mad at that. I was impressed. Tip of the hat to NoSam002. And lastly, match number 8, the last one for not just the day, but for the experiment as a whole, was on Iberian Offensive. It took me 14 seconds to matchmake, and this round was fine. At this point, I was feeling a bit low energy, so I wasn't as locked in as I was at the beginning of the day. The connection was great, my teammates were great, but because the enemies put up a pretty good fight, I described this last round as meh. So, that's all the data from the week of playing that I did. Now it's time to take a closer look at this spreadsheet, starting with the matchmaking times. I'll be honest, I was surprised at how quick a lot of them were. I went ahead and added up all the matchmaking times for each day, then divided that sum by the total number of matches I played in order to get the average. Day 1, Conquest had an average matchmaking time of 2.8 seconds. Day 2, Breakthrough had an average of 18 seconds, with the caveat that I forgot to record what the first round's matchmaking time was. Day 3, Rush had an average of 13 seconds. Day 4, Escalation had an average of 6.4 seconds. Day 5, Domination had an average of 13.5 seconds, with the caveat that I forgot to record what the first round's matchmaking time was. Day 6, Conquest had an average of 7.5 seconds, with the caveat that I forgot to record what the third round's matchmaking time was. And lastly, Day 7, Conquest again had an average of 10.1 seconds. Adding all of those times together, then dividing that sum by 7, the overall average matchmaking time was 10.2 seconds. I gotta be honest, Battlefield 6 is off to a decent start here. For comparison, I went back and watched Exclusive Ace's Black Ops Cold War SBMM testing video, where he and a bunch of other Call of Duty content creators tested to see if SB/EOMM was in the game. Remember, this was when the aggressive skill-based / engagement optimized matchmaking was still relatively new to Call of Duty, given it had only started with the previous game at the time, Modern Warfare 2019. When I looked at the raw data on the spreadsheet that was provided, people's overall average matchmaking times ranged anywhere from 15 seconds for low-skilled accounts to 30 seconds or more for higher-skilled accounts. Now that being said, even though the average matchmaking times for each day on Battlefield 6 were low, there are some individual matchmaking times on here that make me a little uneasy. In particular, the 25 seconds it took for the game to put me into my third domination match of the day, the 43 seconds it took for the game to put me into my 5th regular breakthrough match of the day, and the 44 seconds it took for the game to put me into my 3rd rush match of the day. This is why I say this was a decent start, not a strong one. The next variable I want to take a closer look at is win-loss. Using Call of Duty as a reference again, part of what the SB/EOMM system does is that it makes sure to try and give you an equal amount of wins and losses. The game wants to make sure you have as close to a 50-50 win-loss ratio as possible. This ties into the engagement optimized part, as the matchmaking system wants to hand you out wins and losses as it sees fit so you have those highs and lows. The game doesn't want you to win so much that you get bored, but it also doesn't want you to lose so often that you give up and put the game down for the day. On day 1, Conquest, I had a 50-50 win-loss ratio, where I got 3 wins and 3 losses. Uh-oh. On day 2, Breakthrough, I got 3 wins and 2 losses on regular Breakthrough, I'm counting any matches where I rage quit a loss, and on casual Breakthrough, I got 4 wins and 1 loss. On day 3, Rush, I got 2 wins and 3 losses. On day 4, Escalation, I got 3 wins and 2 losses. On day 5, Domination, I got 3 wins and 2 losses. On day 6, Conquest, I got 2 wins and 1 loss. And on day 7, Conquest again, I got another 50-50 win-loss ratio with 4 wins and 4 losses. Uh-oh. The only time I had a noticeably higher number of wins or losses was on Casual Breakthrough with the 4 wins compared to the 1 loss. Every other day had either a 50-50 win-loss or something pretty close to it. I'm gonna be real with you, the only reason why I'm not saying what the numerical ratio would be for things like 3 wins and 2 losses is because I don't know what those ratios would be. I suck hella dick with numbers and math. I don't know though, man. This seems like it's the game trying to make sure I don't get too many wins or too many losses. I'm not ready to jump to conclusions just yet, but this is worrying. It's weird how the matchmaking times were pretty short, most of the time at least, but the win-loss ratios were consistently either even or pretty darn close to being even. The next variable I want to look at is the game mode column, specifically for Breakthrough. You know the saying, once is happenstance, twice is a coincidence, 3 times is a pattern? How about 6 times being a pattern? Because why did the game put me on defense 6 times in a row during my regular Breakthrough matches? But given how defending is usually a worse experience than attacking, particularly due to the vehicle balance, I can't help but to think something is amiss with that. I can't put my finger on it, but being put on the same side that many times in a row is weird. What's even more strange is that I regularly switched between attacking and defending when I swapped over to Casual Breakthrough. I don't know, that just rubs me the wrong way. The next variables I want to look at are the connection quality and enemy difficulty. The reason I want to look at and compare these two is because I want to see if there's a correlation between the enemies being sweaty with a bad connection. For reference, in modern day COD, the game will absolutely sacrifice your connection quality so that you can be put with the people it deems appropriate for the given match. In other words, are there signs where Battlefield 6 is sacrificing my connection quality for the sake of being put up against difficult opponents? Whenever there was a match where the connection was deemed as bad, I then looked over to see the enemy difficulty. If the enemy difficulty was labeled as hard in conjunction with a bad connection, that would make me a little suspicious. I had 6 matches in total out of this entire experiment where the connection was bad. As a reminder, a bad connection meant there were multiple issues with things like dying around corners or there being a noticeable delay between when the killing shot was sent versus the game registering the enemy as dead. Out of those 6 matches where the connection was bad, 4 of them had sweaty enemies, a little over half. It is worth noting though that in general, the connection on this game has been hit or miss for people, myself included. So it could be entirely possible that the connection variable doesn't mean anything in relation to whether or not this game has a manipulative matchmaking system. And to be fair, the connection being flat out bad for only 6 out of the 42 matches that I played in total for this experiment isn't so bad, but I think this is still worth noting. The next one I want to look at is teammate quality, particularly if there were any combos of my teammates being bad with the enemies being hard. Referencing modern day COD once again, when the matchmaking system determines it's time for you to lose a round, what it'll often do is put you on a team full of incompetent idiots, meanwhile all of the enemies are on the same page with each other. Essentially, Call of Duty is trying to force a loss by demanding that you become a one-person army carrying your whole team if you want to win. There were only 3 matches in this entire session where my teammates were flat out awful with the enemies treating the round like money was on the line. Rounds where my teammates could have been better but weren't the worst, meanwhile the enemies were either putting up a good fight or were sweating hard, were more common, but not alarmingly so. The last variable, did I enjoy the match, involved me tallying up all the matches that I had fun with, the matches that were average, and the matches that were painful to get through. Out of the 42 matches that I played, 23 of them were fun, 10 of them were average, and 9 of them were bad. That being said, these numbers do have a level of subjectivity behind them. There were matches like the 3rd game of Conquest on day 1, for instance. I was in a jet for most of the round on Operation Firestorm where my teammates were useless and the enemies were sweaty, but I still had fun. If I happened to be on the ground for that whole game, I probably would have rated my enjoyment of that match differently. To be fair, things like teammate quality and enemy difficulty have a bit of subjectivity too when you think about it. One person's puppy mode is another person's hard difficulty. Now then, since the next part will be me giving my answer as to whether or not I think Battlefield 6 has SB/EOMM, let me say this. Please do not take this video as gospel. I'm just one guy on the internet who simply wanted to conduct this experiment since I didn't see anyone else doing it. I do not claim to have the definitive answer here. This is simply what I think after having tested this out for a week. I hope that with this video, the conversation surrounding the topic of SB/EOMM in Battlefield 6 will become more widespread. So, do I think that Battlefield 6 has skill-based / engagement-optimized matchmaking? While I won't give a definitive answer because I don't have any concrete 100% irrefutable pieces of evidence that say yes or no, there are signs that skill-based / engagement-optimized matchmaking is in the game to some degree. However, if there is SB/EOMM in this game, it's not as strict as in something like Call of Duty. But the reason why I say there are some signs is because of some patterns I ran into during this experiment. In particular, the ratios of wins and losses for my matches each day. The fact that for all 7 days the win-loss ratio was either nearly 50-50 or precisely 50-50 is extremely suspicious to me. You don't get that level of consistency with the win-loss ratios of each day unless there's a bit of help from an outside force. Other factors, such as being put on defense for breakthrough 6 times in a row, especially when taking into account that defending is usually worse than attacking, that also really rubs me the wrong way. Now, going back to how I specified that if there is SB/EOMM, it's not as aggressive as Call of Duty's, the reason why would be due to the match sizes. Remember, most of the time, people are playing modes like Conquest, which is a 64-player 32v32 mode. That being said, you know how I didn't have a good time with Rush? Game modes like that one have 32 players in them, 16v16 to be precise. So it's possible that as the maximum number of players for a mode increases or decreases in this game, the aggression of the matchmaking system would either decrease or increase accordingly. In Call of Duty, most of the time you're in a 12-player 6v6 match, though there are cases such as Ground War, which is an 18-player 9v9 game mode, or a 64-player 32v32 game mode if we're talking about Modern Warfare 2019's version of it. Because there are less players that the matchmaking system needs to worry about, the aggressiveness of that skill-based / engagement-optimized part can be increased. Meanwhile, with larger player counts, that aggressiveness needs to be toned down so that players aren't sitting for literal minutes trying to find a game. So, if Battlefield 6 does indeed have an SB/EOMM system, it can't be as strict as Call of Duty's because it would take an unacceptably long amount of time to find upwards of 63 other players who are all similar to your skill level. The game could matchmake with an approximate range, but not with any extreme precision like how modern-day Call of Duty does it. Now, some of you may ask, are you sure about this? Some of the matchmaking times were as short as 2 seconds. That is a valid point to make. Like I said earlier in the video, it could be that these matchmaking algorithms have gotten better. After all, Modern Warfare 2019, the game that I would argue started this trend, came out in, well, 2019. From that game's release to now, that's a little over 6 years that could have been spent on refining and improving algorithms like these. Algorithms that retain the accuracy of matching people with each other according to their skill levels, but faster so that people have as few chances as possible to think about other things, which could lead them to put the game down for the day. What these exact improvements would be, I don't know. I passed my intro to computer science class with a C, and my days as a comp sci major have long since passed. Keep in mind, since Battlefield 6 would probably go for a range of skill level values instead of more precise skill level values due to the number of players in a given game most of the time, that could also contribute to the fast matchmaking times. Another possibility could be that the skill-based / engagement-optimized matchmaking is disguised as the team balancing. Here's how that could go. The game does its matchmaking, showing no concern for people's skill levels yet. Then, once the matchmaking system gets a lobby going, when it's doing the team balancing, it's purposefully setting things up for one side to win and the other to lose. Think about it. If you play Battlefield 6 yourself, how often do you get blowout matches versus close ones? And that would explain why the matchmaking times are pretty quick. Unlike Call of Duty's matchmaking, where the skill-based / engagement-optimized part comes into effect during the matchmaking, in Battlefield 6, it would come into effect during the team balancing. Plus, EA and Battlefield Studios could avoid running into legal trouble since, yeah, they would be balancing the team still, just not very well. Something else that I think is worth considering for Battlefield 6 is that there's a lot more flexibility for you to have fun despite being put in a rough game. In Call of Duty, if you're having a bad time, you can't really do a whole lot to have fun in the midst of that. You're stuck as infantry, you can't change your kill streaks mid-game to something more obtainable if the enemies are being sweaty, using a non-meta loadout is just asking for all sorts of trouble. Do you see what I mean? Meanwhile, if you're having a bad conquest match on Battlefield 6, you've got options. You can hop into a vehicle if you're not having much luck playing as infantry. You can dick around with some funny tactics like trying to ram a C4 quad bike or jeep into an enemy tank. Even if you're not getting many kills, you can still get a healthy amount of score by capturing objectives, spotting enemies, healing, resupplying and reviving your teammates, etc. In Battlefield 6, you have options to still have a good game even if you don't have the best KD ratio that round. Of course, this isn't a silver bullet. Your team can be so bad and the enemy so sweaty that you don't even really get a chance to utilize those other options. Or if you're playing a smaller scale game mode like Domination or Rush, things like vehicles are either entirely absent or not as readily available. At the very least, it's possible to make the best out of a shitty situation in a round of Battlefield 6. Meanwhile, if you're having a bad round on Call of Duty, you're SOL. Now, I'll admit, it's entirely possible that I'm talking out of my ass here. The win-loss ratios, being put on defense 6 times in a row on Breakthrough, moments of just not having a good time on the smaller scale game modes like Rush, all of that could be a coincidence. Maybe those instances were purely organic with no manipulation of any kind. The only way we'll get a definitive answer is if the devs show us the matchmaking algorithm itself, breaking down each and every part of it piece by piece. That is a possibility. Back when Modern Warfare 3 2023 was the main Call of Duty title, Activision finally cracked and gave us an in-depth explanation as to how the matchmaking works after years of pressure from the fan base. Now, is the paper they gave us perfect? God, no. It's full of omissions of facts and half-truths that were written with the help of lawyers so that Activision doesn't get sued for lying. Ping is king my ass. But my point is that it is possible for Battlefield 6's matchmaking to be recognized in an official manner. The odds of that possibility are a whole different matter though. Just because it's possible doesn't mean it'll happen. I don't expect the game's matchmaking to be talked about in an official capacity by EA or Battlefield Studios anytime soon. So, the best we can do is run experiments like the one I did and share our results and thoughts with each other. You know, I know this video is supposed to be focused on Battlefield 6 and its matchmaking system, but can we pivot for a moment and talk about how much damage Call of Duty did to modern-day online PvP? Ever since Modern Warfare 2019, not only has Call of Duty not been the same, casual online PvP as a whole hasn't been the same. Skill-based / engagement optimized matchmaking is the boogeyman now. Whenever someone's not doing so well in an online PvP game, their first thought nowadays isn't something like, oh, maybe I gotta get better at the game, or maybe I just happened to get unlucky that round. Their first thought nowadays is, hang on, this game has SB/EOMM, doesn't it? There's no way my performance should be bouncing back and forth like this. And why should they think otherwise? Sure, maybe they got unlucky and just so happened to be put up against sweat lords after they had an amazing match, but can you blame anyone for thinking instances like those aren't coincidences? Our brains have been essentially trained to identify patterns of SB/EOMM for the past 6 years and some change as of this video. Call of Duty, being the best-selling video game franchise year after year, aside from 2025 when Battlefield 6 funnily enough took that crown, has conditioned tons of us to assume that if there's some fuckery going on with your play session, it's because the matchmaking algorithm determined that it was your time to win or lose. You didn't just happen to get unlucky. It's not that you suck at the game. Instead, it's because the game rigged your match so you either had a great time or a bad time. Whenever a developer says that their game doesn't have any manipulative SB/EOMM, our gut instinct is to go, nah, they have to be lying somehow. We immediately press X to doubt most of the time nowadays. Hell, as I was making this video, the devs said that they were looking into possibly changing things about the disbanding lobbies. But lots of people are gonna press X to doubt and assume that either nothing will end up happening in the end, or the change will be so insignificant that it may as well not even have been an update. Even if there truly is no skill-based / engagement optimized matchmaking in any way, shape, or form in this game, and I just committed however many weeks of my life to this project for nothing, can you blame me? Will I keep playing Battlefield 6? Yeah. Will I continue to have fun moments with this game? Yeah. Although Battlefield 6 is currently committing one of the greatest fumbles in video game history right now when it comes to a lack of content, the core gameplay is still really fun. I'll keep playing this game and I'll keep having my fun with it. But from now on, I'm gonna be more attentive to when things don't go my way in a game. Or even if things do go my way, I'm probably gonna do things like take mental notes of how many wins and losses I had for a particular play session. Doing this experiment has forever changed the way that I'll look at Battlefield 6. But if I'm able to keep the topic of skill-based / engagement optimized matchmaking in this game going with this video, then it'll have been worth it.